Hello, it's Steve here again from the Studio One Soapbox. In today's video, I want to discuss reverb. Now, for a lot of mix engineers, reverb has become a bit of a dirty word. A lot of them prefer to use delay and completely will avoid reverb simply because they can't get it to work for them. But there's a couple of things that are crucial when it comes to using reverb. One is having an understanding of what reverb is. Two, learning how to EQ your reverb. And three, and most importantly of all, using timing and timing your reverb to the beats per minute of the track that you're actually working on. And if you could get all these three things together, you'll find that reverb will work for you very well. You'll understand when and where not to use it, and it'll become a great tool to you when you're doing your mixes. So today's little music that we're going to be working on and using an example is this. Okay, so you get an idea. It's sort of EDM meets rock, a sort of progressive rock type thing. Nice track, nice vocal. So, what is reverb? Let's start at the beginning. It is reflections of sound within a room. These reflections are obviously dependent on the room dimensions, the size of the room that you're in, and the absorbable material that is in that room. So for instance, if you've ever stripped out a room to do a bit of redecoration, obviously you will notice your voice seems to echo around the room. It's far bigger within that room. It sounds far louder. And that gives you an idea of what reverb is. Also, dependent upon the room size, that will be bigger. There will be more reflections. The sound will be louder. So keep that in mind. The bigger the room, the louder things will sound. The other factor when it comes to reverb is absorbable material that is in that room. So before you stripped out that room to do your redecoration, you're bound to have settees, sofas, curtains, carpets, stuff on the walls, and all these things work as dampeners to the reverb, so they will make things smaller. So you can use these two things alone when it comes to reverb. Use this and keep this picture in your mind when it comes to working with reverb, and it will help you to understand when and where to use it. Now, the most important thing of all when it comes to using reverb is timing. A lot of mix engineers will just totally avoid reverb altogether in favor of using delays because delays are easier to set up when it comes to timing. Of course, it depends on the unit, the delay unit, or the delay plugin, but generally they are far easier to set up. So when it comes to reverb, we can use the same thing. Now, reverb time is the time it takes a sound to drop by 60 dB. That is what the timing of a reverb works off. So knowing that is when a sound initially is heard, the time it takes to drop by 60 dB in volume is the reverb time, and that is what all reverb works off. Now, in this first example, what I'm going to do is solo our vocals, and that is the first place we normally think of when we go to apply some sort of reverb. So what I have here is I've set up 3 effects channels. This is quite common when setting up reverbs, especially for a vocal. So on this first channel, this one, I have a short verb, a room reverb, and what I've used is the free one that comes with Studio One. And simply I've set up a room reverb. Now, when it came to timing, how do we work out what we should set our length, which means the timing of that reverb, the tail length, how long should that tail sound? That's basically what that is. So it is a bit confusing because timing here would be you know, maybe a bit more self-explanatory, but length is the timing, as you can see here in milliseconds, of what we want our reverb to be. So without further ado, if we come down here, you can see the tempo of this song is 117.5. Now, working with our 60 dB of our reverb time, how long it takes that sound to drop by 60 dB, what we can do here, if I just open up a wee calculator, and there we go, and we type in our 60, which would be 60,000. I don't want to get into too much that there, it's a bit technical, but if you just remember, 60,000 is what you divide by the tempo of the song. So if we divide the tempo by 117.5 beats per minute, as we have in this case, and we come up with 510. Now, that's 510 milliseconds. That's the optimum time that our reverb would sound when it would drop by 60 dB, if you can understand that. So, how long will it take our reverb, the initial sound, and the tail of that reverb to drop by 60 dB, in this case, would be roughly 510 milliseconds. So, with that knowledge, we come to the length here, and I can't get it just exactly because in this case, double clicking doesn't allow me to type it in, but this is as close as I've managed to get is about 504. The other thing to think about when it comes to timing is the pre-delay. How do we work out what our pre-delay should be? And what exactly is pre-delay? Well, pre-delay is, say for instance on a snare drum, we have the initial hit of the snare drum, and instead of the reverb kicking in straight away, we can slightly delay it so it comes in behind the initial hit and doesn't wash out the initial hit of that snare drum. So we try to always delay our reverbs ever so slightly using pre-delay. How do we work out what we should use there? Well, if you're really unsure and you don't want to work it out, pre-delay usually is 20 to 40 milliseconds. That's quite common for it to land somewhere in there. And if you're really unsure, if you just slap on a 20 milliseconds, let's see, if I grab here and I just hold down shift here, see if we can ease this up slowly. There we go, 20 milliseconds. That kind of is quite an average, which should work reasonably well across all types of instruments, vocals as well. So if you really don't want to be bothered too much with it, if you just set up a 20 millisecond pre-delay, that should work in most instances. But if we want to be a little more accurate, how we do it is we just keep dividing our length of reverb or our time of our reverb until we hit between 20 to 40 milliseconds. So I really shouldn't have clicked that off, but if we go back to our calculator, we had 510 milliseconds is the corresponding length of our reverb for 117.5 of our beats per minute tempo. And if I divide that by 2, we have 255 divided by 2 again, and we have 127 divided by 2 again, 63. We're still outside our 20 to 40, so let's divide it again, and we have about 31.8. So if I set the pre-delay roughly so that I can time it as well, and I go to about 31 milliseconds, that's kind of set up our pre-delay. 510, if I can slowly, no, it's not as easy to work that, and I'm not quite sure why. Maybe a little fault there, but the closest I can get is 504. So I've done a lot of waffling. Now let's hear what the vocal sounds like with this short room delay, and it's just on this channel here. So, and I've got a sound going to our room reverb. So let's hear that going.
Levels that revel for a fight.
Let's hear that again.
Levels
I'll solo the reverb.
that revel for a fight. A light
Solo the reverb.
running through the night, calling us on home. Levels that revel
Now if I take the reverb off,
for a fight. A light burning through the night,
reverb back on.
calling us on.
So basically that is a very basic room reverb set up for the right timing on our tail length, which should be 510 milliseconds in this case, and we've chomped that down, constantly dividing by 2 till we hit between 20 to 40 milliseconds. Now this is quite rough and not very specific, but to try and get somewhere that fits in with the timing of the tail length and setting up our pre-delay, and we came to 31 milliseconds. We've just chosen a nice room size here with 100% on the mix because this is send, and I've simply controlled the amount going with our little fader here on the short verb room. So when it comes to vocals, what's quite common is to set up a couple of reverbs, and when it comes to verses or it comes to a pre-chorus or the chorus itself, what we can do is we can mix and match these in either by automation, where we could push a little of one and drop a little one out, and we can use these reverbs to constantly change the vocal as it's going through, depending on what emotion we're going for. How close we want that voice to be to people. Maybe we want that pushed a bit back. Maybe when all the instruments come in, we want a lot more effects around that and to raise the volume a little by using reverbs. And so it opens up the doors to lots of possibilities to use when it comes to a vocal. So what I'll do is, on this second one, I have a medium plate, which is the open air, which is the excellent impulse response plugin that comes with Studio One, and I have to say this is fantastic. As you can see, I've just went for a medium plate and I've chose the ambient plate 6000, but you know, there's lots to choose from, and you just choose one which you feel suits the song itself. Again, as with all things EQ, compression, reverbs, delays, it's how it sounds in context with the track you're working on. You really can't slap on the exact same settings for every other track. There'll always be a little bit to maneuver around and change it and get it to work lovely with the track at hand. So I've got a plate going on here. Again, as you can see, I've 31 milliseconds on the pre-delay. But this time, instead of 510, I've doubled that and I've got 1.2 seconds to create a slightly medium reverb. And finally, in our third one, if I can get this to open, interesting, try that again. Okay, I seem to have found a little fault here. When I double click the insert, there it is now. Don't really know what happened there, but what I've done is I have my short verb, which is just a room reverb. I have my medium, which is a plate set at 1.2 seconds, and finally, if I open this up, you can see that I have went for a music club to create a hall effect, and it is 2.5 seconds. So as you can see, I've kind of doubled as I've went along the length of the reverb. In the first one, it's 510 milliseconds. In my medium plate, it's 1.2 seconds. And on my long haul, it's 2.5 seconds. This would be quite a common setup, and you can just bring these things in and out. Then you could always have these set up with your favorite reverbs, whatever plugins you have, or whatever suits the bill. And then you can, as I say, you can automate these and bring them in and out as the song progresses to add effect or motion, push the voice back behind the music, bring the voice to the forefront. Basically, the drier that it is, the more closer it will sound to the listener. Also to note, when it comes to EQing reverbs, is that the more you would push the highs, the closer and louder that effect would sound. And the more you would cut those highs, the further it would push that effect back. I hope that makes some sense. I'll maybe show that a bit later. So let's just play this here vocal, and what I'll do is I'll add these plates back in and out just so you can get a feel of how they would work in the mix. Here we go.
Levels that revel
Let's add our medium plate.
for a fight,
Bigger effect.
a light
Let's add the hall.
burning through the night, calling us on home.
Then when it comes to chorus, say we add them all in.
This is our sign. We are saved by our Maker. Live life alive. This is our crime. Levels that revel
Take them all off.
for a fight.
Do you hear the way when that is dry and there's no verb, the voice is right up close to the mic? And this is used for quite an effect in many cases to draw you closer to the vocalist and make it sound like they're right up on your speakers and speaking to you directly. Then you could add in a little room reverb, which was our 510 milliseconds. If this would open, seem to be having issues here trying to get these to open. As you can see, our 510 millisecond, just a wee room reverb, a very short room reverb. Then we have our opener giving us an ambient plate at 1.2 seconds, our length. And as I say, at the end we had our altiverb, which is really struggling to open. And I chose this New York Hall. It had a 2.5 second reverb on it. So quite a common thing to do with the vocal is messing around by automating sends. So you could have maybe the vocal really dry for the first chorus, the first verse. Then maybe the pre-chorus, add on the short verb for the room, and then maybe in the chorus itself, bring in the medium plate as well. It's all whatever you want to create, and then maybe on the last you could bring in all the reverbs for a big added effect. It depends on the music, of course, and depends if things actually work. The only way of doing that is to just use your ears and listen. If the voice goes too far away, you know you've too much verb on. So you can use all these different things to add an effect on a vocal. So if I just move on, so it's quite common to EQ a reverb. So if I just take all these settings off, just to save a bit of CPU, because these verbs, a lot of them use a lot of CPU cycles, and I'm on a very sparse PC, as I've said many times before, doing these little videos. So what I've done, another common thing, is to send all your instruments. Say for instance, you didn't have all the band all together in the room, but they'd come in individually and played their parts at separate times. But you wanted to create it the fact that they were all in the same room at the same time, all playing live. A great way to do that is to just create a room reverb, as we have here. You might want to have that a little longer, maybe 1.2 seconds, something like that, but we'll go with what it's at now. And what this can do is, if you mess around with the length of the time and time it to the track, it can sound like all the musicians were indeed all playing at the same time, all in the same room. So if I can take the solo off and go back to that, and I have the bass bus, the guitar bus, the keys, which are a synth pad and a piano, and I've also sent our drum here. I've sent our snare drum to this as well. Mostly, unless you're going for an effect, you wouldn't really send your bass drum. Keeping it dry always keeps it at the forefront. You don't really want to push back in the mix unless that's the effect you're actually going for. So what I'll do is I'll play this, and we'll take this room reverb on and off as we go. Definitely some sort of issues here. We'll try this room reverb, and I'll take it in and out and listen to the mix and see if it feels like it's adding some sort of glue by making you think that all these musicians and the vocalists were all in the room, all playing live at the same time. Here we go. I'll start with it off. Let's bring it in.
For a fight, a light running through the night, calling us on.
Back in.
This is our sign.
Take it back out.
We are saved by our Maker.
Bring it back in.
This is our crime.
So hopefully you can hear that. It is quite a subtle thing, but it does demonstrate how you can use a room reverb and send all the instruments, the vocalists, maybe the snare, maybe not so much the bass drum or percussion, possibly. As I say, just listen to it and see what works and what doesn't work. And how you can use a room reverb to bring all those elements together and add a little glue and make them sound like all these musicians were all playing in this particular room all at the same time. So that's another idea. Another one of reverb that is quite common is our snare. So this free one, why will that not open? So this free one that comes with Studio One called Mixverb, the manual does state that it's clearly made just to be used as an insert directly on a track and not really to be used as a send, although you could use it as a send if you did want to. Again, what I've done here is I've went for our 30 milliseconds, 31 milliseconds. I can adjust the room size and I can adjust the dampening, which mimics having furniture or having people within that room who would absorb some of the reverb and obviously lower the effect somewhat. So if we wanted to add some reverb to our snare drum, which is quite a popular thing to do. So let's have a little listen to that, and I'll just solo up the drums, and I'll take the verb off the snare and put it back on just so you can hear what type of effect it has. Take off that send. Here we go. Take the mix verb off. on. Increase the size. You can really hear the reflections there. Bring it down. You can almost create that 80s big slamming snare sound, which was popular back in the day. Thankfully, no longer as popular as it once was. Right, so that's a couple of things. Remember your timing and how to work that out. Remember your pre-delay. Don't ignore that. It is crucial to getting a good reverb sound. Is probably one of the most important things to set up on your reverbs. Also, what we can do, if I just come out of the drums here, for instance, how we can have quite a mono sounding effect, and how we can use reverb with a little EQ to spread it out within the mix. So what we have here is a synth pad. Let's listen to it. So you can hear it's quite annoying, and even though it's a stereo effect, it sounds quite mono. Now, if I add a bit of reverb to it, and I add a bit of EQ, let's hear it in the mix. Let's take those effects off. It's right in your face, and there's no escaping it. It's very loud. Put on the verb. And it kind of puts it in the background and creates a space for us for the vocal and other central instruments like our kick drum and our bass guitar and our snare to push through the mix. So this is a good way of, instead of trying to do some sort of crazy panning, hard left, hard right, and putting some sort of effect on. And what I've done here, if I can get this to open, I don't know what's going on. There we go. So what I've got here is the classic AMS RMX 16. This was a classic unit used back in the day. And what I've went for here is a 6.2 seconds, I should say, of a decay time, which is quite long. Maybe closer to maybe 4 seconds would be better. It's not available on this particular type of delay, but as you can hear, it does a wonderful job of spreading that well, what I would call quite an annoying pad. Let's hear it again. You know, it's really in your face. And if we bring in the verb, in context, so you can see that you can actually use reverb for a very mono track and make it almost sound stereo, like you've did some strange panning. You can also tuck it in behind the rest of the mix, make it drop back into the mix the more reverb you use, and stuff like that. So that's just another way of using reverb on singular tracks. So another way to deal with reverb is EQing the reverb. Now, you can EQ the reverb to make it sound more prominent by brightening it up. In this case, by adding some 12K of a boost of 4 dB, or you can darken it down by taking away 4 dB at 100. So this is how we can make things fit in a little better, we can use EQ to help the reverb either fit in, tuck in better, or to get out of the way of a vocal, for instance. And I've sent it through this EQ before it goes into our room reverb. This is the Bobby Owsinski mimicking the Abbey Road plate, and it's a low pass filter set at about 11k, 10k, a high pass filter set around 600 Hz, and we've taken a little dip out of the middle by about 3 dB, 2 or 3 dB, just to allow room for the vocal to shine through. So if I take that off and you hear it just go into a room reverb,
Levels that revel for a fight,
put on the EQ,
a light burning through the night,
take it off.
calling us on home.
So I think you can hear from that quick example how you can use EQ to tuck in or make room for the reverb and stop it washing out everything, where you can make it a bit more controlled using EQ. So for instance, if you want that reverb to be more prominent, to step forward in the mix and be really heard, you can boost your highs, add some 10, 11, 12k and give it a shelf and a boost. If you want to tuck it in, you can cut those highs around that region as well and make it a bit darker so that it tucks in under the mix and it isn't so well heard, but yet if you take it off, you notice that it's gone. And that is the secret of reverb. Sometimes you just want to have it there without it really being noticed, and that's what EQ is great for. So you can either EQ into it, or you can EQ coming back out of it, as is the case. So let's hear that again, just in our quick example.
Levels
That's the EQ on,
that revel for a fight,
EQ off.
a light
Hear the way it washes it out more.
burning through the night,
EQ on,
calling us on home.
and it makes it sound a lot more controlled and also gets out of the way of the vocal itself. But yet if we take that reverb off, you notice that something is missing, and that's how to set up a great reverb, that it is there but it's not so much noticeable or in your face. So lastly, all I want to do is just go through and click on some different reverbs, because all reverbs are not the same. And I just want to demonstrate that there is a lot of difference, even though these settings through all these reverbs are all the same. A lot of them are just demos as well. I haven't won the lottery and went out and bought a load of plugins. It's just to show you that even the difference in different plugins, how reverbs can sound so much different with the exact same settings. So let's just have the vocal running. And what I'll do is just create a new little loop there and have the vocal running, and I'll just flick through these reverbs, turning them on and off, and you can hear some of the differences. Here we go.
Levels that revel for a fight,
Here's the waves one,
a light burning through the night,
not so noticeable.
calling us on
Here's one by Soft Tube,
home. Levels that revel for a fight, a light
one by Valhalla,
burning through the night, calling us on home. Levels that
Phoenix Verb,
revel for a fight, a light burning through the night,
Just the dry
calling
vocal.
us on levels that revel for a fight,
Here's the LX 480.
a light burning through the night, calling us on levels
Let's turn on the slate for
that
classics.
revel
That's really effective.
for a fight, a light burning through the night, calling us on
Now let's go for Altiverb.
levels that revel
And again, we're just
for
using
a
a 1
fight,
second delay on the AMS RMX 16.
a light
Turn it off.
burning through the night,
Just the vocal dry.
calling us on
Back in.
levels that revel
Let's go for opener.
for a fight, a light
As you can hear, it's excellent.
burning through the night, calling us on levels that revel.
So you get the idea. All different verbs have all different types of effects, and it's just utilizing the right one for the right track at hand. With Studio One, we have mix verb. If I go back to our snare, here's our mix verb, which the manual says is specific for just dropping straight in as an insert. So suppose that would be great where maybe you just want to add a bit of verb to a mono guitar, or maybe the snare itself. That's basically what it's for, just to drop straight on there. Or maybe you're doing headphone mixes for people. You could just drop a bit of mix verb on there, send it to the singer so they have a bit of verb, and sometimes it helps the singer be able to sing a bit better. They feel a bit more comfortable having a bit of reverb on. The next one that comes free with Studio One, we have the room reverb, bit more complex. A little more settings here. We can mess around with the room, the size, the width and the height, which does affect the reflections within the room. The bigger the room, the more reflections, the louder the reverb will be. We can also mess around with the geometry. It's a bit more complicated, but the main two here are our pre-delay and our length, which is the length of our reverb. And as I've said earlier, how to work that out, you can just go back in the video there. Also, I'll put a wee link below. There is people who are kind enough to do online calculators. I'll just see if I can get one now. If you don't want to manually do it yourself, divide in 60,000 by the beats per minute of your song. So in this case, if I can just get typed in here, 117.5 is our beats per minute. Calculate our reverb and delay times. And if we scroll down, there we can see for a quarter note is 510 milliseconds, which is what we have used in this case. But you can also get everything else, all the little bits in between. A 64th was the 31.92, which we were using for our pre-delays in this example. So you can see that's quite handy, having those online calculators if we find it a bit difficult to do it manually. And the next one that comes free is indeed Open Air. Where are we? There we go. And this is a fantastic impulse response. You can use third-party responses by just dropping them in here, or it actually comes with quite a load itself. We have small rooms, vocal rooms. In this case, I'm using a plate. There's also chambers, which was the real world way of doing it. Certain people like Les Paul at Capitol built a specific chamber, a very expensive tiled area, where we mic'd that up and recorded the sound going in and those reverbs coming back on it. Once we got away from chambers, because they were quite expensive and quite a niche piece of studio equipment or room to use, we started using plates, the like of Abbey Road, the classic AMT 140. Those things use electrodes. We picked up reverb that way, working with a bit of a damper. We could control the reverb, and those things were cheaper than making the chambers. And then nowadays we have all these lovely plugins and digital reverb units creating all manner of things that just couldn't literally be recreated in real rooms in the real world, but OpenAir is a fantastic plugin, and it's completely free. It comes with Studio One. What more do you want? Excellent. So I hope that helped in our overview of reverb today. Remember, the most important thing when coming to reverb is imagine that singer or that instrument in a specific room, and then try and recreate that room. Next after that is your timing. We need to time it to the beats per minute of the song that we're using, just so that it fits in better and doesn't really stand out or cause any weird anomalies, washing effects and things like that, or washing out instruments or vocalists, and timing that with our length of our reverb and also with our pre-delay, so that it just gets out of the road of the initial sound and doesn't wash that out, the initial attack. Pre-delay is excellent. We can also then engage EQs, which help us to carve our reverbs so that it gets out of the road and doesn't muddy up, in this case, our low end. Or we can take little dips out, as we have here, to make room for the vocal so that it's not just there all the time. On top of that, we can also automate these things, where we can use a short verb, a medium plate, and a long haul, as we have on our 3FX channels here, where we've sent our vocals. And we can automate having the short verb on maybe for the first verse, bring in the medium plate for the chorus, and then on the last part, where we're really going for it at the end of the tune, we could have all three reverbs in, and we can automate these, pushing and pulling them just to give big effects to the song. So don't ignore reverb. Just understand that it's all about timing. Time your verb to your project, your beats per minute. Time your pre-delay accordingly. Either do it manually or go to one of those online calculators, as I've shown you, that does it all for you. So I hope you found this useful, hopefully a little educational, and I'll catch you in the next video. Happy mixing, and thank you for joining me.